You know, Arthur L. Hunt Jr. originates from Dumas, Arkansas, and of course across America have sojourned, ministry being a major umbrella, and ministry, entertainment, edutainment. Those are the core pillars that I have worked with, and of course I work for God. That's how I summate. Yeah, so to describe who I am and what I do, I work for God. And in the biblical outline, there are things that we all do to take God's use of us to the highest regard. I like to say I'm in use without excuse. So the ministry is, I define ministry as finding ways to assist others in achieving the God-ordained purpose for their lives. Finding ways to assist others. So one day it may be getting food out to people who need food. Recently coming out of the pandemic, we did $1 million operation from Dumas. $750,000 was food. And then the other work with staffing and support, traveling and getting things so they can be operationalized. That's God's use of me. Teaching the Word. Teaching is very important because you get knowledge from sources to people who need that information. And so always looking for new information or information that can be brought to people that helps them fuel their knowledge. So I'll use those two things, and inside of those, feeding the soul, feeding the body, and then the spiritual food, the Word of God. So we want to make sure that we're taking what God has given us, where He takes us, to help the people in His creation. Yeah, this is the first published work from the College of Aspiring Artists. From 1968 to 2018, we saw 50 years beyond Reverend King's life. So Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is known as a civil rights leader, but we know him best as a biblical rights leader. So when you think about a league of sports, they always want to make sure that talent in the league gets a branding product, a branding ID. Might be a sneaker, might be an Air Jordan, might be a Kobe Bryant, might be a jersey from whomever. But we looked 50 years later, there was no direct work that depicts the genesis of Reverend Dr. King's calling. So his genesis is the Word of God, the Bible. This was his weapon. So this was the first published work from the College of Aspiring Artists on the 50th anniversary of his final prophecy and death. So 2018, we dedicated this Bible from the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. Yeah. You know, when you look at the beginning, and I always say this, so it applies across many thoughts and platforms. Don't jump in the middle. Start from the beginning. Stay to the end. That's your complete picture. And so when we see just God in the beginning, it was just God. We were not here. There were no denominations, there were no political parties, there was no brand or label that got into this space of what God has ordained for His creation. And you look at how we've infiltrated and contaminated this space with our many different ideas. We've got to leave this space for sovereign God. His ways are not ours. His thoughts are not ours. And we have to sign up for GOD, just God. No brands, no labels. So that's where it was in the beginning, just God, who is a just God. So you're talking about justice. It's in a social world. I bring this Bible back to us because when I mentioned Reverend Dr. King was not a civil rights leader, but a biblical rights leader. It's like taking an attorney in the 60s and saying, that attorney, or that doctor, let's look at a doctor, a medical doctor in the 60s that were treating people that were being injured or harmed. They didn't sign him up or her up as a civil rights doctor. Whatever their specialty, whatever their specialization, you said that's a heart doctor. You said that's an orthopedic surgeon. You said that's an ear, nose, and throat doctor. You don't generalize. You give them their specialized name. So Reverend King, while he was out in a social engagement, dealing with some civil rights, he was coming from a biblical rights activation. He was activating the Word of God. A civil right can be a biblical wrong. A civil right could be in society that was conjured up, an unjust law. And sometimes they had to do protest against the unjust law. But I say to those who have a Micah, M-I-C-A-H, in the book of Micah, in chapter 6, 7, and 8, it talks about what God has laid out. He has shown, He has revealed, He has published, recorded. What is good and what does God require of you and me? To do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. So these are the things that we are to do in the world that is. Sometimes, as we come in the middle, you may say, this is my denomination because it was in your family. You may like a certain cuisine because this is how your grandmother, your mother cooked it. And you said, this is the only way to do chicken. I'm going to bake it, or I'm going to barbecue or fry it. But you go to another culture and they've got it fettuccine, teriyaki. They've got it lemon pepper. They've got it Asian style. So it's the same chicken that was here on day 5 when God created the fowl of the air. Same chicken, but just presented in different ways. So what we want to do is to get people to understand just God is the origination. When I meet somebody, as I see you on the tour, I'm not concerned if you're Democrat or Republican. I'm not concerned if you're Baptist, Methodist, or whatever your denomination. I'm concerned, do you have the God of the Bible, a God that is about love, permeating? And are we doing the work of God? Are we loving one another? Are we helping to do what He says over what man says? So this is the GOD, just God, no brands, no labels. Let's get in the movement. It's a good point because when we say just God, no brands, no labels, we're talking about a sacred space. We're not talking about IDing things that we do that God has gifted us to do to be the best individual, the best talents, the best program providers. So TCAA represents the College of Aspiring Artists. And I spent a lot of time working with intermediary talents. And so that when you're systematically starting from the beginning, so at home you're getting your first lessons. In the womb of your mother, You're learning, you're hearing. That's the beginning in the natural. But the real beginning is God thought of us before we got into our mother's womb. He knew what day and time we were going to come into our earth vessel. And so when we talk about a college, you talk about an intersection where a mind has looked at a purpose that God has given them to be creative. Sometimes that creativity is the main driver. Sometimes it's a part of us that is secondary. So you're talking about working to achieve purpose and to create wealth and resources. The College of Aspiring Artists focuses on the creative economy, edutainment. We're going very intense to the sports and entertainment category, so we can help persons better brand their talents and enterprises. Entrepreneurs, the brand is about you, the business of you. How do I get myself in the best representation of who I am and God's use of me economically? So the College of Aspiring Artists is that 6-month, 12-month, 18-month program that gives you coursework to matriculate and become the best individual enterprise you can be.